I came up with this title even before the State of the Union address last week, just because I'm that history guy, and I liked the idea of it, and I liked the idea also of taking stock, of stopping for a little while and trying to catch up on where we are. So here we go. As always, when we talk about what's going on at school, this is where we should start. So when we have our talks about what our larger initiatives are going to be, what should guide our decision making, what should the board keep in the front and center, it's always going back to the mission statement. So I try to always bring the mission statement into the things that we do. And then below that are the values that we have listed as well, that the school has embodied over time. So to me, these are the things that always should be guiding what it is that we do. The other thing that's guiding what we do is the strategic plan. And as you remember from looking at the strategic plan that we wrote last year, these are the 4 major pillars of the strategic plan. What are the things that we need to keep our eye focused upon in the next few years? Okay? So those are the things I think that guide us. And also to echo the political version of this speech, what is the state of the school? The state of the school is very strong in so many different ways. And it's such a privilege for me to be head of school at a time when things really are going so well. And to be honest, when I can benefit from all of the hard work that's come before, that all of you have done, that all the faculty and staff have done, that the administration has done. But there's so many ways that we are in such a great place. And I want to talk about some of those today. And then I also want to talk about some of the challenges that we have ahead of us, because there's always challenges and there's always work to be done. So as we think about the work to be done, how do we characterize or how do we prioritize? Well, to me, that's what we do here and what we do the best. Is we think a lot about what we're doing and we try to invest in the things that matter the most, right? And what matters the most for us are people, our program, and this place, this beautiful place that I walk across to every day. And I'm going to use this sort of structure as I go through to try to organize a lot of what's going on. Okay, so investing takes a lot of different modes. You invest your time, you invest your treasure, you invest your talent, and we'll talk about all of those. So if we start, where we just talk about the financial piece. Okay, out of roughly operating budget of $20 million in a year, these are the things that I spend a lot of my time thinking about and talking with the board about and with the finance committee about and with Sue Downing, our CFO. So where does the money come from? Well, 77% of our revenues come from tuition. And that's pretty much what the pie chart for almost every school is going to look like. Tuition does not cover all of our expenses. Never has. And at almost no independent school does tuition cover all of our expenses. Right? So as we spend time every year at the board level really thinking about what is the tuition going to be for the next year, we need to be very thoughtful about both the revenue that we need to run this place and run it at the level that we expect, but also balancing out costs for people who can send their children here. And as we know nationally, or as I know nationally, the number of people nationally who can afford to send their children to an independent school is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking each year. So there's a smaller available pool of people who can pay the full cost of going to an independent school. The boarding school world is really concerned about this, as their prices are double what it costs to go to a place like North Shore. But that's a reality. So what that means is that we have to get our money from other places. So things like the annual fund that Molly McDowell and her office run for us every year. We couldn't run the school without it. The endowment, which we'll talk a little bit about later. Our endowment is that piece up, the darker piece, 7.8% of our budget every year comes from the endowment. And there's ramifications of all of those things for the way that we have to plan financially for the school. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, where we spend, investing over here, so many of these are really fixed costs. And they are, they are in the right balance, right? Almost 60% of our expenses are for the humans, the people who run this place, and the people who care for your children every day. And that is as it should be, right? After that, we get to plant in keeping these wonderful buildings running, and financial aid, right? So that's a large portion of our budget, and that has to come somewhere in here. And that's why we have things like the scholarship dinner coming up, and why we make such a point to make sure that scholarship aid is part of our expenditures every year. So we'll talk a little bit more about this along the way, but this kind of gives the overall framework. I mentioned our endowment, and in so many ways we are blessed with the endowment that we have. There are many, many schools who would really die to have an endowment of $25 million. And yet there's more work to be done because of that gap that we talked about here, where tuition only covers 77%. Our endowment becomes more and more important each year as costs rise. And the biggest cost raise every year is the human raise, and making sure that people get, a decent raise each year who work here. So our endowment right now provides almost $1 million a year in revenue for operating expenses. That makes a huge difference. We couldn't really do what we do without it. So when I look at the way that we spend that money, salaries and benefits, professional development for our faculty, and building the academic program, and providing scholarship support for students, our endowment helps us do all of those things. But it's also why this chart here explains why one of the priorities going forward for us is going to be really trying to build the endowment through a capital campaign and through careful investment over time, because it will secure the long-term future of the school. It'll help us pay the bills, which is great, and we like that. But the endowment also is our safety net. It makes sure that we can pass the school on to the next generation, knowing that there is that safety net and that protection from financial downturns, and to make sure that our intergenerational compact with each other stays solid, stays sound. So you'll be hearing more about this along the way. I haven't checked the number after last week or the last 2 weeks, so it's down a little bit from this, but we're in good shape. So people, if you've gone through the Royal Breakfast, you know this experience of sending the seniors off. Investing in teachers, okay? That's one of the most important things that we do, and we invest in the teachers in lots of different ways, okay? First of all, professional development. We have a very strong professional development program, and yet there are places where I want to make it a priority to make it stronger. All of these things are a result of the fact that we have both endowed funds and we have operating budget that is directed towards teacher training and staff training. And while we are able to do these things every year, there are opportunities that we are not able to provide to our teachers, whether that's people who are looking for graduate study or people who are looking to do different sorts of trainings over the summer. We don't always have the chance to do that because we don't quite have the funding for it. But again, we're in strong shape, could be stronger. Then also competitive and attractive salary and benefits. That to me is the biggest weapon that I have. So when I leave on Thursday and I fly to Boston and I go to the biggest hiring fair of the year to look for new teachers, I know that I have the weapons at my disposal to be competitive when people are looking for jobs. But it isn't just salary, although salary matters. Benefits are really important, right? There are a lot of people now who are paying more attention to what medical and dental looks like, what our 403B program looks like. And I know, and I'm getting a better sense of how we stack up against other schools and about how teachers are comparing us against others when they're looking for jobs. So there are two major things that attract people to this school. Number one is the culture and the program of the place. This is a wonderful place, and it's a great place to teach for dozens of reasons. Your children are high amongst those. But number two is we can be competitive when we are trying to get teachers to come here, to attract them here. So I will spend Thursday and Friday, actually Friday and Saturday, in a ballroom in a hotel in Boston, basically speed dating teachers from 8:30 to 5 o'clock, where you go half an hour stints and they come, and I have to have my elevator pitch about why they need to come and teach here at North Shore, and they have to convince me that they are the right person to come. And then we sort of filter and filter and filter down. But this is one of the ways that we can do that. And professional development is an incredibly powerful enticement for people. Say, okay, your salary, you're a teacher. Teachers don't get paid in our society exactly how they should be, but North Shore will pay you well, and will also invest in you as a person. We'll make sure that you can continue to grow here as a person and as a teacher. And these are the things that help me to do that. Okay. Teacher training also. This is something that I believe in 100%, and I believe in investing in young teachers as well. So that not only serves us as a school, but it also serves the teaching profession. And I think that a school that is as lucky and blessed as we are has an obligation to also serve the teaching profession. So how do we do that? We have two relatively new formalized programs. One in the lower school is an assistant teacher program. We've had assistant teachers in the lower school for a long time. Tim Sheehan is now kind of formalizing that program to include a regular and kind of codified mentorship process within that. So over a 2-year period, lower school teachers are preparing to be full elementary school teachers. And that most likely isn't going to be at North Shore, although it could be. But it just means that they're ready to go. They've had a great experience. I mean, could you imagine a better teacher training experience than to spend time with Kathy Irvin or Anya Least, and then going into a program? So that's one. And then I've talked a lot about the Penn Fellows program. This is a group that we're a part of with 10 other East Coast day schools, where we take promising young teachers who are just out of college or recently out of college. We train them, and they are working with the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education, and they get a master's degree from Penn at the same time that they are working in these schools. So North Shore is part of this group. We are the only school not on the East Coast. The others are schools like Roxbury Latin, Shipley, St. Anne's Belfield, Riverdale Country School, and they all work together in a cohort of young teachers, and they work with teachers from schools and from the University of Pennsylvania grad program. So this, to me, is also part of our mission. It's part of training and investing in people. And some of you might have, we have 2 fellows in the first year of their program this year in the upper school, Zach Blickensderfer and Brian Sarfo. Some of your children might be in their classes. And they are doing a great job, and they are getting great training from mentors here. And I would say also the feedback we've gotten is that the mentors who are working with these teachers, that's Kieran Aston and Brian Frederick in the upper school, they are raving to their colleagues about what an amazing experience it is for them, rejuvenating their own teaching and seeing what teaching is like from a different set of eyes as they sit in on classes of their colleagues every day. So again, investing in people is a huge portion of what we do. Also, in terms of people, are some of the best news these days in terms of admissions. And this is one of those places where I can bring a little bit of data to bear. But I always, if you've heard me talk too much, I always go back to Perry Dunlap Smith, who founded the school. I spent some snow time this weekend reading through some of his writings, and I'm always inspired, and I'm also pretty amazed at how many through lines there are from when this place was founded in 1919 to today in terms of what we try to do. So those are our students of exceptional purpose, promise, and ability. And what's the good news? Well, the good news is over the last few years, our inquiries, applications, and enrollment are at record high, right? That's great news in so many different ways. Our geographic reach is the broadest ever. Jason Giffen told me this third stat, which I thought was fascinating, that 20% of families here at North Shore are either international families who have moved here to the North Shore, or they are American families who have spent significant time overseas as expats. 20%. That was fascinating to me, and I never would have put those pieces together. And we talked about that, and the sort of the number of corporations on the North Shore that have executives and people moving around is a big part of that. But I think this is something that we should be talking more about, and that we will be talking more about, because when we talk later and we talk about the overall diversity of the student body and of the parent body, this is an important piece of that. And it makes just the entire school environment that much more vibrant and dynamic, okay? And then also our latest numbers are 27% of our students are students of color, which I also think is a really important fact for us to recognize and celebrate, and is important for all the same reasons. So what does that look like? First of all, how does that happen? Well, we try to keep growing the pool. The more applicants that we get, the more ability we have to curate the student body. Who is a best fit child for North Shore? The more choices you have, the better, right? And Jason will tell you that this number, not a surprise, that sort of the general reputation in green and you, current parents, are the biggest reasons that our applicant pool is growing, right? Jason would also say that that green piece has been growing over time as the news about what's going on at North Shore gets out. That reputational piece is growing. So we have more and more people who are in the applicant process saying, yeah, well, we just, we were asking around where we should be looking for our children, and our neighbor whose kids go, to Glenbrook South said, you should probably look at North Shore. That's really important. And that's part of what we hope over the next few years to also leverage a little bit through better marketing and clearer messaging about who we are, that you all can use and that other people can use to say, oh yeah, North Shore, that's the place where, and have that little snippet, that little elevator speech. Part of that is that we've already been moving in terms of trying to get our name out there a little bit more. And we've talked about this last year in terms of the marketing piece. We've got a great group in the communications office, and they are getting more and more information out to local press, and that has helped a lot. But here's this one example. The Chicago, we didn't have anything to do with this actually. The Chicago Magazine said of the 93 independent schools in the Chicagoland area, we were number 5. I would quibble with that. I think we're a little bit better, but I didn't want to get picky with them when I spoke to them on the phone. But that's great. That gets the word out in a really broad geographic range, right? But the more that people see us in the papers and see what's going on here, for somebody to say, okay, wow, John Lewis, it's kind of a big deal at North Shore, really? And get that out there. But also, we've gotten a lot more, especially from the Winnetka Current, on the arts and the athletics lately, right? So we've got things like this. This was a great article in Winnetka Living about the interim program this fall of Rebuilding Together, where the group went out and did some great work with a local family and basically helped to rebuild the house of an underprivileged family. And as I said, I'm going to keep using this "Down Goes Goliath" headline every time I can because I just love it. So I'll probably keep that up in my office for a good long time. But this is not all by accident either. That's Tura and her crew who are getting that word out as much as possible because there's so much good stuff happening. And it seems there were times when we were a little hesitant to talk about all the good stuff that's happening, and that can shift, I think, and it is. So what does that look like? This is through last year. And this is just overall enrollment. So if you look back, 2013, overall enrollment was 512. Now we're at 545 where we opened school this year. And most of that growth, if you look at the numbers down below, we've got middle school, lower school, upper school. Most of that growth has come in the upper school, right? So redoing that building has been a real catalyst, I think, and it's we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the growth in the upper school has been significant, and we're pretty much full, right? We're shooting for 60 students per grade, and I think we've got a handful of spots across all 4 grades, but we are full, and that also leads to a whole bunch of different challenges and opportunities that we can talk about. Here's inquiries and applications, and you see, a pretty dramatic change in inquiries as well, and that represents, I think, that marketing piece, that reputational piece, and some of the things we talked about earlier. Okay? So don't know exactly what our completed applications are going to be because we always have X number that come in between sort of March and August with relocations and things like that. We add kids every year, particularly kids who move here, families who move here in the spring. So each dot represents a family. And as you can see, we've got a range that goes basically all the way up to Waukegan and all the way down into Chicago itself. I love this. I love the spread of this. The geographic range, I think, is really another powerful selling point for the school and just a powerful point about kind of making us who we are. We talked a little bit about that earlier, but I think this has been a positive, significant, impactful change as the school continues to diversify. We have a number of students of color last year who had a huge range of schools that they could choose from, including boarding schools out east, and a number of them are here. We often compete with LFA for students of color as well, and then city schools if they're coming from the city as well. But that range reflects all kinds of diversity in many different ways. So what are some of the challenges that we face? This is great news, and in some ways we're swimming against the tide successfully, but New Trier is predicting that there'll be a 15% drop in school-age families in the district in the next few years, right? Other schools, both nationally and locally, especially K through 8 schools, are seeing application numbers drop. School is expensive, and parents, particularly millennial parents, are being very choosy about where they're spending their money and looking for clear sense of what's the return on my investment. They are tough consumers, and we are bucking the trend, and we've got comparative data with schools across the country who are K through 12 schools and suburban districts, and we can slice and dice data. Many of them are struggling, particularly K through 8, to grow their application pool, and we happily right now are not. Tuition pressure is something we're very aware of, and it goes back to that endowment piece in those budget slides of how can we insulate ourselves from needing to raise tuition so significantly to cover our costs that we price people out of this opportunity, or we have fewer scholarship dollars that are available. So that's a continual challenge for us. And then also, I think back to the last point about how do we differentiate ourselves? Why are people choosing to send their children here? We need to not only fully understand that and have been working through that. But we also need to help arm you and arm parents with that answer to say, oh, well, duh, because da-da-da-da-da, right? And be able to say it and be able to have the language that makes it easy when you're in that conversation with other people who are sending their kids to other schools. Why make this choice? Well, we made this choice because of this. So, and we're continuing to work on that, and you'll see some of the fruits of that labor, I think, pretty soon. You might have heard, we're having this scholarship dinner. I don't know. I mean, we've been pretty quiet about it. Like, I haven't talked about it very much. 19%, currently 19% of the student body receives some sort of aid. That can be tuition aid, but that's also supplemental aid. That's to enable children to go on interim travel trips if they're in the upper school, to have help with transportation if they're coming from a distance, to pay tech fees and things like that, to get computer support, to be able to go on that team preseason trip. Those are things that are part of our financial aid budget, and it's critical so kids are feeling and knowing that they can access the full range of this wonderful program. This year we gave almost $2 million in aid, and most of that did not come from the endowment. So one of our primary challenges in terms of scholarship is that we need to secure that money going forward so we can continue the progress that we've made on making sure that as many wonderful students have access to our program as we can. If it's not in the operating budget, if we can shift it to endowment in some ways, that means that there's money that can be used for other things, to keep building program, to keep supporting teachers. This will be a major goal of the capital campaign that's coming up. It is one of the pillars of our strategic plan to endow a greater percentage of this number. And for me, not only endow it, but to continue to grow the number of students that we can offer aid to. I think it's essential to any great school, and it's essential to our mission. Okay, program. I had to throw another quote up. Sort of quintessential Perry Dunlap Smith recognition of what it means to educate the whole child. The fun part about this quote is he was speaking to a group of pediatricians. It was a conference of doctors that he went to. And the rest of his talk is kind of fun. He's like, you know, you guys, you're kind of missing the point here. You can't just treat the disease, you've got to treat the patient. That's the same way we talk about education. And so this whole speech was about the parallels between that idea. So he was a big proponent of this idea that you're not just preparing for the future, but what you're doing right now matters as well, and that still guides so much of it. Both of these things guide. From the strategic plan, we ensure that our program in the classroom and beyond prepares students to actively engage their worlds and embodies the school's mission throughout their lives. There's a lot in our strategic plan, but to me, one of the single most important points is this piece here about the curriculum. If there's nothing else that I'm able to accomplish in my time here, but that we can weave and evolve our curriculum to reflect these ideas, I will consider my time a huge success. Because schools are changing, and I've talked a little bit about this. I'll try to put some more meat on the bones. Schools are changing because work is changing, and society is changing, and information is changing. So what does it mean to develop skills to complement content knowledge? That's one of our primary tasks, right? When you live in a society where information is instantly and ubiquitously available, knowing stuff becomes less of a differentiator. I can find stuff instantly now that in graduate school would have taken me 3 hours to go through a moldy set of books in the bottom of the stacks somewhere in a library, right? But what's going to matter is going to be what can you do with the information that you know and that you can find. We need to work on that. What do we need to work on? We need to focus more on our scope and sequence. And that's something that my division heads know is task number one. How do we handle the handoff from grade to grade, from division to division, so we know that the baton is being passed seamlessly in terms of what they're learning? right? That hasn't always been the case here. It hasn't always been the case at any JK through 12 school that I know, right? But it's crucial because we can leverage the possibilities of having kids for that long period of time. It just takes some focus and some discipline and better communication. So this is something that is going to be very important to me. Teacher evaluation, you can't have one without the other. You need to continually make sure that you are gathering the information and evaluating your teachers as well as you can. There's no perfect science on this, but we've got a pretty good system. We have places where we can improve. So that's another high priority for my administrative team. Departmental review is something that we're going to be starting next year. I put it in the strategic plan. We're going to do external reviews of all of our academic departments, and that'll happen on a rotation. But it's easy to get kind of down into the weeds when you're just doing what you've been doing for so long. We're going to bring in people from the outside to look at each of our different disciplines and just help us hold the mirror up. Are you doing the best job that you can? Are you, do you have a sense of what best practice is, how your field is changing? So that's something that I have another meeting about tomorrow morning, actually, to build on this external review that will start next year. Data collection is something that I'm a big fan of, and we're continually looking for ways that we can gather more data so we can make decisions that are really well-informed decisions. And you'll see some examples of that. And then last week, I don't know, did anyone in here speak with these folks when they were here last week? Yeah, thank you. So we brought in a team of people who are looking at our entire information technology and educational technology program. Everything from our infrastructure to how we're using it using technology in the classrooms to our one-to-one iPad program. What should we be doing? So we're looking forward to the report that these folks will be giving us in another week or two, and then really digging into that. For me, one of the biggest takeaways that I kind of knew, but it's nice for them to give some momentum to it. We need an IT strategic plan. We can't just be reactive and say, oh, this looks cool, let's do that. Or we need to make sure that we're redoing the routers every couple of years so we've got good connectivity. We need a 10-year plan, a 5-year plan of where we want to go with technology. So we'll be beginning that process. All of these are ways to continue to refine the program. And some of them are happening already. And I certainly am not going to go through all of these. There's a number of things in the lower school that Tim Sheehan has already brought in, including this year redoing the entire schedule in the lower school. It may not be something that's visible to those of you who are lower school parents, but your kids are getting more math and literacy times. Just in the way that we sort of schedule longer blocks, fewer transitions during the day. They're still getting all their specials and all of the things that make the program so vibrant. But when you're young, more literacy, more numeracy, those are good things. This is something that I really liked that I read in an article a couple of days ago or a couple weeks ago. So what do we need? This is college and university presidents saying this. That's a data point. That's useful, right? But it also is the nature of the workforce, the nature of the work that our students are going to be doing, right? So how do you work backwards from that? Well, it goes back to this idea that I've talked about of really focusing on the skills that kids are going to leave with. There's lots of people who are writing about this right now. What are the key skills? So Pat Bassett, he was here a few years ago on campus speaking to the faculty. These are the things that he says are going to differentiate people in the workforce, that who's going to be successful and who's not. Okay? The European Union did their own list. There's lots of overlap. Here's another way to look at that. People get more and more kind of funky with the graphics around this. But this is the framework for 21st century learning. This got a lot of attention. It's about 10 years ago now, so they'd probably update this again. But what are the things that impact the skills that you need are on the bottom, and what's the sort of cornucopia of skills that you do need, right? this is a generalized way of looking at some of these things. I like this one. This was a group that talked specifically about the future of work. What are our kids going to be asked to do when they are out in the workforce? Are they going to be asked to be data entry sitting in a cube somewhere? Most likely not. So on the outside, what's work going to look like? It will be data and metrics driven. It will be grounded in relating. These are the things that people are saying, when we take out all of the jobs that can be outsourced to machines or to robots or to overseas, what's going to be left? And interestingly, these are the things you're going to be, the blue hexagons are, what are you going to be able to need to be able to do? You're going to need to be able to solve problems. But you're also going to need to thrive in ambiguity and uncertainty. So somebody I read a couple weeks ago said that the killer app going forward is not going to be knowledge, but learning. The ability to learn quickly and adapt quickly is going to be the thing that's going to differentiate people going forward. This one I thought was really interesting because at the key is the social emotional piece. So if everything is digitized or outsourced or robotic, the things that are going to impact you are going to be the human relation skills. Who can lead a team, right? Who can build a consensus? And those are all things that we've always paid attention to, along with the skills building and the knowledge building that we've done. So I feel like in some ways, a lot of where education is headed is catching up to where Perry Dunlap Smith was almost 100 years ago. And I think that's kind of a really interesting thing. It was one of the reasons I came here. But what does this mean? Well, we need to look at what we're doing. We need to map the skills that we're teaching just like we map the content that we're teaching. And it goes to that JK through 12 scope and sequence of your classes, right? If you're building a skill here, well, you better not be doing the skill the same way 5 years later, right? You need to make it more difficult. You need to iterate. You need to come back, and you need to continue to build a skill set to an outcome. And that's a lot of what we're going to be doing as a school over the next decade or so. Part of the program here, college counseling, just a little bit of information about what we do. I have seen a lot of college counseling offices. I have to say that this is one of the best I have ever seen in terms of their approach to knowing kids and finding fit for kids is superlative. And I don't use a lot of superlative language most of the time. I qualify a lot of things. They're really, really good. And part of it is that they've built these same relationships with colleges. So the colleges know what they're getting out of North Shore students. So just some data. Now over 160 colleges every year come. Basically the whole class submits an early application now. When I was in high school, I bet it wasn't 30%, maybe 40%. Everybody now submits either early action, early decision, or some sort of early portion of the rolling admissions process. And then this last data point Kristen Kaczynski gave me for this, which I thought was really interesting. The range of schools that our kids are looking at is growing. And that, I think, is a really important point. Coming from a place where there was a list of 10 schools that people all applied to, and you had 40 kids all applying to the same school when you knew they were only going to take like 3, it didn't work. This is a much more thoughtful, humane, and I think individualized process than I've ever seen. Also in the program category here, we've had a lot of work in terms of our equity, inclusion, and diversity work over the last few years, including both a task force on the board and a strategic plan committee last year. They have a set of recommendations that they've given to the school in these 5 categories. That work continues and is accelerating in many different ways, one of which is this, which I sent an email out to everybody just a few days ago. I like data. And I don't like just anecdote and reacting to anecdote. So the AIM climate instrument is done by the National Association of Independent Schools. It's an anonymous survey that asks people, what's your experience? What is school like for you as a parent, as a trustee, as a student, as a faculty member? And so we can get a better sense of what we're doing well and where are the places that we can work. So this email, I set it up in an email that went out last week. You should get this link maybe even today for a 15, 20-minute survey that asks a whole lot of demographic questions. So we actually have a sense of who's in our community and the way they choose to identify. And then, how is school going? We've had a number of really interesting conversations in the upper school lately with some recent alumni of color and some current students of color who have had conversations together. And they have been really fruitful and really illuminating conversations, right? Some folks have a very different experience of this place. And we need to make sure that we're aware of what that looks like in order to serve kids and serve families really well. So I very much hope you'll take the survey and give us our data. That, again, is totally anonymous. We don't even see the raw data. The NAIS organization takes the data and then gives us a report, and then we will communicate back on the report. Okay, athletics. Lots of great news in athletics, which also have led to, as I mentioned to Heather before, some pressure points. As always, our participation rates are going to be the thing that are most important to me. I believe in sports. I believe in team sports. I believe in fitness, although you wouldn't know it looking at me. I don't always practice what I preach. And it has been an important part of the school since we opened. Perry Dunlap Smith in that quote talked about fitness, right? So we've had great success along with participation. Tennis, state champions, field hockey, #2, lots of teams in the playoffs. Girls basketball, killing it right now. Volleyball having one of its best seasons in years. But challenges with that. How do you continue to find the right balance of making sure kids are playing, but also that we're providing all of the conditions for the teams to be as successful as they can, right? That's important. You know, I'm not one of these people who believes everyone gets a ribbon and that's what it's all about, right? If you're keeping score, try to win. It doesn't matter ultimately, but do your best, right? But participate and try to succeed as best you can, and know what it feels like to win and earn that, and know what it feels like to lose and work to get better, right? Our facilities need work. Our basketball teams this winter have been squeezed and shuffled and rotating and playing at times that I don't want them to play and having fewer practices than they should, and we need to work on that. And we're working on that. How do we have some programs that are really big, right? Tennis has a huge number of kids playing and we don't have enough courts. So what does that mean? If that means that we're starting to compromise the experience that the kids have, we've got work to do. Here's some participation numbers. Upper school, middle school, and then combined. So in the upper school right now, for instance, we've got 17% of our students are playing 3 seasons a year, right? Those are kids, if they're doing it all 4 years, who become Iron Raiders and get that recognition for playing 12 seasons. But, you know, I'm very happy that we've got so many kids who are playing sports, and even in the blue no sport categories, there's a handful of kids in those categories who are pursuing sports outside of school that they get some sort of exemption for, whether they are excellent swimmers or figure skaters. They say, I'm doing 30 hours of work. You know, do I get credit for that? Like, yes. But you have to apply for that because we want to encourage kids to be on teams here. This I'm going to just go through quickly. This is the Independent School League. We offer for the size of our school, we offer a pretty good number of overall sports. The sports in purple are the ones that we offer of the sort of officially recognized IHSA sports. I like the idea of a bowling team. I think we should look into that. Athletic task force. This was something that we've just convened in the winter time. It's being co-chaired by Corey Chandler and Patrick McHugh. And I've asked them to look at all of these things, looking at our mission for our athletic program, that balance of participation and success, and then digging down into all of the things that we need. What sports should we be offering? Are there others we should add? What do those look like? What do we don't offer football in the fall anymore? What can we offer as an alternative? So there's not 42 golfers on the golf team, for instance. What do our coaches need to be most successful? Are we providing them the training that they need? Facility and budgetary needs is a huge part of this. Not just more courts. What else do we need? This is part of the strategic plan. It's going to be part of the capital campaign, but we need to do it in a way that is thoughtful and serves the needs of the program rather than just something that looks shiny and new. Right? So we're starting with mission, and we're going from there. Right? All the way down to team snack. Right? Who does team snack? Coach Sy, team snack. Gotta love it. Right? But there are things that parents do. There's a wide range of things across the upper school teams in terms of what parents are responsible for, what coaches are responsible for. There's differences between teams. I don't like that. Let's figure out what the kids need and let's give it to them and figure out who gives it to them. So that's getting a little granular, but this is our opportunity. This group will be soliciting input from the entire community about the things that we need to work on. So it includes coaches, parents, alumni, trustees, and faculty who are. Okay, place. I'm gonna speed up a little bit. This is a chart of the investment in spaces in the last decade. Sorry, longer than that, 2004. We've done an amazing amount of work updating the campus, and that's been through capital campaign, through gifts, through the Alumni and Development Office working really hard. We've done a tremendous amount. We've got some more to do, and I think athletic facilities are near the top of that list, but also, this is my wish list of things over the next 10 years that we're going to be working on, right? So we need to look at the library again. Libraries have changed even since the last time we redid the library. Dramatically in the way they're used and the way they support learning. I want to keep looking at our STEM facilities to make sure that they're giving us what we need from them. Athletic facilities we've already talked about, looking at court space, looking at the MAC gym. A turf field I think would be probably a good investment for us at this point with the growth of the program and the community aspects of having those games on campus as opposed to over in town. Parking and traffic flow, particularly I can't imagine what car line looked like today with the snow. It's probably kind of a mess. It's an opportunity for us to think differently about how we do that. And signage. So we can work on signage. We can work on the way that we present the school. We also have the Centennial coming up. Lots of exciting things that are being planned in these different categories, not only in the curriculum, but events, exhibits, lots to be proud of that we want to celebrate with our current families and our alums. These are two quotes that we've gotten, and just comments we've gotten in the last couple of months that just I really loved. I met with Margie Ensign, who's an amazing university professor. She was here and wanted to meet some of our students, so we set up a lunch with upper school students to meet her, and I met with her afterwards, and she was gobsmacked by the kids that she sat with. She just was incredibly impressed. And then this is a quote from a student that we got through the marketing study that just warmed my heart, right? That's what it's about. That was a lot. I went longer than I thought. I'm sorry. I got talking. But I'm happy to answer more questions. Well, thank you for taking more of your time than you expected. I'm sorry. I would love feedback on this presentation as I continue to hone it and make it better, or on topics that we didn't touch, or if you just have questions about individual things, I'm happy to answer those too. So thank you very much.